Well, welcome everyone to another Interviews You Can Use. And today I'm with Dr. Barb Provost from Provost Consulting out of Chicago, Illinois. Barbara is not only an actual doctor in education in how adults learn, but she's also a certified coach of the ICF and an adjunct professor at Roosevelt University. Welcome to my interview, Dr. Barbara.
Thank you.
Dr. Barbara, or may I call you Dr. Barb?
Dr. Barb is fine.
Okay. Dr. Barb, I've known you now for about 6 or 7 years. I had you on this interview because I think people, I've had you on my show before. You have been in my practice, helped me in my practice.
Yes.
I wanted to kind of introduce through our network what you do at Provost Consulting because I think it's unique. I think it's distinctive. And the best part about it is I think you could really help us in certain arenas, especially for me. It was really a great advance in my practice to learn how adults learn. And I thought I knew what I was doing, to be honest with you. I hate to say, I guess I just didn't. So when we're talking today about adult education, how do adults learn? I know that you went to school for this. I know that you're highly educated. Your consulting practice is circles around this. Tell me what it means when we're breaking out your services, your menu of support and education. How do we learn? How does it affect the people that you deal with? Who are some of your vendors, people that actually use you in your consulting practice?
Well, I know that many people, especially in the sales arena, have a lot of experience going to sales training. And a lot of times what you might find is they get called into large venues where there's a lot of PowerPoint presentations that are downloaded for either a couple hours or a couple days. Well, that's not what we're about. What that is that's called presentation or communication. But what we do at Provost Consulting is we actually design and develop education that's going to help the end producer be successful, confident, and competent in the work that they do. Now, a lot of organizations, they think that training and development is very expensive, and it can be, especially if it's done incorrectly. Because when you take people off the sales line or the workforce and you bring them into a training environment, that's a lot of time out of production. And so you want to make sure that that time spent in training is really an investment in the company. But if you haven't designed and developed education that's really engaging and really hits the mark for the learner, then it can be a big waste of money. It's better if what we do at Provost Consulting is we come in and we work with organizations. We ask, what is the end goal? What is it that you want to do? And we do an assessment. Sometimes it's a training issue, sometimes it's a communication issue, sometimes it's just a motivation issue. But in order for an organization to meet their strategic goals, they need to help develop their employees so that they can get their end results.
Well, I would think that if that's a strategic goal of a corporation, then their tactical goal is, how do I educate our admin, our field force, the people on our assembly line? How do I educate them? Because you made a distinction that we're not talking about sales so much or training, we're talking about education.
We're talking about education. We're talking about getting leaders the resources into their hands so that they can best educate their frontline salespeople. Salespeople, I always think that businesses are made or broke at the front lines. The waitresses, the salespeople, the people who are doing customer service, those are the people that are a facade to any organization. When they're touching the customer experience has to be pristine, or else the customers will walk away and there's so much competition out there. So when I go into different organizations and when I'm shopping myself, I'll go through and assess, has this organization really trained their folks well enough that they will earn my sale?
And when we do education as a support item to a strategic corporate goal, it would appear to me that this is so important, and yet I don't think it's being done very much.
Training is being done to a certain level. What I find is a lot of organizations feel that it's very expensive, but the reality of that is if it's not done well, if they're just bringing in an expert and putting up some PowerPoint slides, it's very expensive for the organization without any value. What's really valuable is when they bring in experts like Provost Consulting to come in and help them create a strategy in which they can develop engaging education. Now, it just doesn't have to be instructor-led education. We develop a lot of just-in-time education, so it can be webinars that are built just in time with engagement interactions. We help people use different types of training tools, like a WebEx tool or something to help facilitate training within their field force, things like that. There's a lot of different ways that we can engage and educate.
I heard you say assessment is a big front-end first stage.
Right.
After you go through the assessment period, what's the next stage that you traditionally look at in your consulting practice?
What we would do then is we would design an education curriculum, whatever the end goal is. It might be, it could be a 6-week curriculum, it could be a 6-hour curriculum, whatever the end goal. And so what we do is we put a model together that says, this is the design of what we think will help fulfill that training need, that educational need. And then once that's agreed upon, then we go ahead and develop that. We put all the bells and whistles around it. We build the training guides, we build the webinars, we build whatever components are needed to facilitate that education.
Are you the educator, or are you just the construction or the design of the education?
We can do all of it. So we can do all the way from assessment down to execution.
So you can actually present.
We can facilitate
in a classroom scenario.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So, and then how does your coaching, your certified coaching, work its way into your practice at Provost Consulting? How does that work?
Well, certified coaches work in an individual one-on-one basis. And the reason that I went for my coaching certification is because it really mirrors what we do in terms of education, but it's on a one-on-one. So if we have, it's the people who are at the top of their game who really want to get to the next level. It's the Serena Williams, those people who are really expert. You would think they know it all, but she wants to tweak that a little bit more, get better. It's those people who want to get that bigger sales goal or meet that dream goal that they've always wanted to get to, but they just can't get off the mark. So we meet, talk either via over the phone or sometimes in person, and we make a plan in order to achieve those goals.
When I think of the time and the expense of assessment, education, and the actual implementation of the education through classroom or however, I'm thinking, what is the actual impact? Because people who are listening to our interview say, well, I've heard about these things and I think that's a good thing, but how will it impact? What kind of leverage, what kind of bang for my buck, so to speak?
Right. Well, first of all, if the education is planned out and executed correctly, and it's the right education, which is all found out up front in the assessment, then it can give you a good return on investment. Let's say you're rolling out a new product line, or let's say you're making a change within your organization. You hear a lot of organizational change. Education helps support those changes. You can usually turn your return on investment and tie that back. That's first and foremost. But also, what employees want in the workplace now is, people think it's money. They all want more money in their paycheck. That always helps. But the number one thing that people want is growth and development for themselves in their work. They want to be successful in the job that they do. So if organizations are investing in their employees, employees will have a higher motivation. They'll feel much more successful on the job and much more competent to do their work.
Now, I notice you have a huge resume, and of course, if you, I can't talk about it now in our interview because it's so long, but if you went out to your website, www.bprovost.com, that's listed there, the people you've engaged, some of the companies that you've been working with. And then your email is barb@bprovost.com. That's PROVOST.
That's right.
Now, when I'm thinking about do you ever see the things that you're doing as an adjunct professor at the University of Roosevelt, or the Roosevelt University, that actually play back into your corporate experience?
Absolutely. I do a lot of education around power and influence in the workplace. I teach a lot around communications in the workplace, which is huge. And I also teach change management, which is also huge in the workplace. So a lot of the application, and what I do when I teach is, a lot of it is, how does it apply in the work that you're doing today? A lot of my students are already in the workforce, getting their degrees, trying to get that next rung on the ladder. And what they're doing is, the best learning is if they can talk and have discussions in an educational environment, go back and apply or talk to other people in the work environment, come back and have those discussions.
Well, I think it's important to point that out because these are people that are already working. We're talking about not college, we're talking about people already having to apply these things. Immediate impact into their company. And so if I have individuals attending classes, we're just actually explaining this on a larger scale, corporate side. Now, when you engage a company, do they have kind of a look-see, put their toe in the water, so to speak? In other words, if I did an engagement and I did an assessment, that's one part of the pie. Whether they implement or not, that's still one section. You'd get paid on that, and that would be one of your principal ways of revenue for your consulting.
Sure. We can always go in and assess. Let's say they have a great training program they think is doing pretty well, but they want to fine-tune it or tweak it. We can just go in and do an assessment. What's working, what we feel is working, not working, where they might have some other ways that they can advance the learning.
So during the discovery process, You're walking through all these gathering information, coming back, making an assessment, because I think that at least would be a common denominator that every corporation would want to do.
Sure, sure. It's always a good idea to go back and get some professional assessment of the education that you do so it doesn't get stale, so that you're using the latest and greatest technology if available.
Well, finally, my question would be, how do I measure the quantitative result of an education or going through your consulting? Because some people might think, well, how do I measure that? Is it just anecdotal? It was good, but is it actually turning numbers for me? Is it bringing more money or profitability or better sales or support with my admin or good customer service relationships?
Well, there's always different ways that you can measure education. It's never a real one-for-one correlation. You can't say because we did this, then X. For instance, with a product that you're rolling out. It might say, yes, we rolled out the product and we sold what we wanted to sell, now we wanted to exceed it, but there's a lot of different intangibles around there. What about the product? What about the market? What about how it's being sold? What about the competitors in the area? But there is marked research where you can correlate the greater, better, more engaging education. And even these days when people are so busy and working, things are changing so fast, what is the just-in-time education we can get to them so that they can even get education in smaller amounts of information and smaller nuggets so that they can continually apply the information that they learn to get their return on investment?
Well, my last point then, on Provost Consulting, if they want to engage you, they go out to your website, make the contact at www.bprovost.com.
Right.
And could they say, I would like a cursory meeting?
Sure,
just
absolutely.
to kind of a call and just to kind of engage to see if they want to go forward.
I'd love that.
And is that a free consultation?
It is, yes.
Okay, so they can go ahead and contact you on your website.
Right.
Ask for a free consultation, and they can measure whether they want to move forward or not.
That's right.
Well, Dr. Barb, I appreciate you being here on our interviews you can use.
Thank you.
And I'm sure that many of our companies that we deal with may want to actually touch base with you and how we've enjoyed your consulting services ourselves. And me specifically, I really thank you for so much.
Thank you.
Well, that's Interviews You Can Use with Dr. Barb Provost from Provost Consulting out of Chicago, Illinois. It's Interviews You Can Use.